Welcome, I'm Shane Leslie of Integrated Governance. Recently, with Cameron Prevost, CEO, and Graham Gentles, Chair of Orange Ex-Services Club, we presented a seminar on board succession planning. This was part of the RSL and Services Club's conference held in Melbourne in September. So I'm going to take you through that presentation and talk about some of the major aspects that were revealed as part of that presentation. And I showed some statistics that were done by a recent KPMG survey. These were fresh statistics, 30th of June, that pointed out that 75% of business leaders believe that a strong and transparent alignment of board talent with strategy is imperative. So it all comes back down to strategy. Who is on the board should be very, very strongly related to your strategy. Boards need a greater amount of diversity in viewpoints and backgrounds. And that doesn't necessarily mean more women on the board, but it's talking also about age and race and different types of perspective and orientation on the board. 61% of business leaders. Now, 64% of business leaders aren't satisfied with their board's combination of skills, backgrounds, and experiences. And it is a very difficult thing to manage, getting that mix of the right skills, backgrounds, and experiences for the current strategy and the future strategy. Strategy sometimes changes, and it means we need a different mix of people on the board. But here's the big one. 43% of business leaders see a major problem is resistance to change due to status quo thinking. That means we've always done it this way. Why should we change? Everything's working as today, and those kind of things. 43%. That's 1 in every 2 directors don't want change. That's a big issue when you are thinking about strategy and moving forward in a much more complex world. Now, 14% of business leaders state that they possess a formal succession plan that is aligned with future needs. Only 14%. But 77% of business leaders say that formal succession plan is integral in achieving the right mix of skills and perspectives on the board. So you need that strategy, and you need to align your directors with that strategy, the right mix of skills and perspectives. So you don't need a highly talented bunch of skillful people, but you need a mix of perspectives as well. 77%. So those two statistics really stick out. It's critical. We see the need, but we don't do anything about it. The alignment of board talent with the club's 3 to 5 year strategy is the most important consideration when succession planning. So we come back to that strategy. It is central. It is really super important to get robust strategy in place. Now, I have a special offer for everyone who books strategic planning with me, and I'll tell you more about that special offer at the end of the presentation. Orange Ex-Services, we asked, are we fit for the future? Since 2008, Orange Ex-Services has achieved substantial growth. There's a 450% increase on the bottom line. That's not revenue, the bottom line. There's some massive building projects completed, and there's a few more in the pipeline. And Cameron there has recruited a really talented management team. They've become a key economic driver for the region. And when we talk about economic drivers, we're talking about jobs, and we're talking about community support. We're talking about helping out with infrastructure. When we did some research on the area, we found out that 75% of the population is aged under 55 years old. This is quite phenomenal. And that youthful age group has seen significant tourism, arts and culture, small bars, and the identity is the agricultural, food bowl and growing wine industry really make a big impact. There's many young professionals choosing to stay in the area, so young people aren't moving out of the area to work. They're staying in the area to raise their families, or there's a lot of young professionals moving from Sydney. Despite this, there is some real socio-economic pressures. This means that while the branding makes it look quite a wealthy area, there are a lot of low-income earners in that area, both retired people on lower incomes and younger people still establishing their careers and taking some risks in an entrepreneurial spirit. So the board asked, what What knowledge and leadership do we need for the future? Where are the gaps between today's needs and tomorrow's? And what's the best way to manage those gaps? They're really actually hard questions to answer. So what did Orange have? They had past success. They had some real pressures of external change. Well, they're still ongoing. And they had a strategic culture. There was a number of strategies put in place over the years. And so the board had that strong strategic culture already established. If I said to you do you understand what's made your club successful in the past 5 years, or the barriers to success, could you answer that question? Do you know what are the top 3 current external changes that may impact your club in the future? It's really important to have a culture of evidence on your board. So what are those external changes and how did you check them? How robust is your board's strategic culture? So I had some questions there. I understand the most important strategic actions to monitor every board meeting. I can quote the strategic action and the actual financial results. So you can actually see what you strategically requested and the financial results. I can see the strategic vision on the floor of the club or in progress in products and programs. And I ensure resourcing of the strategic planning process, including specialist advice, personal reading, and I know where I can add value at the board table, and I know where I need to do extra study to effectively lessen the perspective gap. That's super important. Now, Orange had in place a number of already really, really strong governance tools. They had already looked at their constitution and continue to do so about nominations and how, the rules around nominating service members and that kind of thing. And they already had established the triennial rule, which takes a lot of pressure off looking for new directors or to freshen up the board profile. So only 3 board members are going up for the vote in every year. Now, Cameron and Graham had designed really, really in-depth bylaws or board policy. I have a 40 board policies book. The bylaws that Orange had were the most in-depth that I have seen from a club. Mandatory director training, everyone's completed that, and they haven't just done the online, they've done face-to-face and they've gone beyond. Directors have completed the Governance Institute face-to-face course, and Graham and Cameron have just recently completed the Australian Institute of Company Directors course. Education framework, so that education framework extends into leadership and attributes, and that's something that the board's working on this year with the strategic plan looking at leadership attributes. And again, committee structure and charters, they were in the bylaws, really strong and in depth. So a lot of groundwork has already been done at Orange X Services. So if you pop over to the worksheet, you can think, well, how do we compare? When was the last time I read the Constitution? How strong are our board policies or bylaws? The stat deck, director training. Do I do face-to-face or do I just get away with doing the online training, which is only a small part of that robust course? Now, there's no excuse. Canterbury Helston does face-to-face training. I do face-to-face training, accredited, and so does Clubs New South Wales. So there's a whole bunch of options there. There's no excuse really. Education framework. Have you got a skills matrix? Have you got committee charters with board roles and responsibilities and the functions of that committee and the end date of that committee? Strategy. Do you have a strategic culture? A lot of strategies I see only touch on operations and facilities, but there are massive challenges in leadership and culture. There's massive challenges in marketing, technology, your workforce, a whole pile of things. And if your strategy doesn't address these things, it's not robust. And position descriptions. So at what we put in place for the board succession planning is an independent nominations committee, information book, pre-nomination education program, and that included mandatory director training that the club paid for up front, face-to-face, advertising and public relations program, a candidate selection process, induction and orientation process, And a board evaluation, I evaluated the board pack and the leadership of the group, the board and senior management, see how they fit in together. The Independent Nominations Committee book that I wrote was some 80 pages long, so very comprehensive document. The first section was about being a director of the Orange Ex-Services Club. There was a general overview of why we were looking for people, the importance of keeping a fresh eye on board succession planning. I talked about the strategic plan, the general behaviours of that strategic plan and the general direction, not specifics. And I put in the director's code of conduct and then a role of the board of directors, position description of a director, position description of the chair. Talked about the board learning and development program and the skills matrix. What were the expectations in those areas? So anyway, anyone who read section 1 had a very good feel for the role that they were nominating for and the style and the culture of the club, educational and strategic culture of the club. Section 2 was about member education. This was not the public book, but this section of the book talked about the importance of media releases and public relations. There was a fact sheet on the major aspects of the club, such as assets and turnover and revenue, etc. There was a couple of draft advertisements which the marketing manager took and made his own. There was a PowerPoint presentation for that member introduction session, and pathways to succession. So different ways that the club could find directors or potential directors. For example, looking at the CDSC committees or the people that they sponsor money to, and significant members of the community who should be tapped on the shoulder. Section 3 was applying for a directorship. This was in the public book as well, and it had all the information about the candidate selection process. There was a checklist, the stat deck. The Orange have their own statutory declaration, which is extremely robust. It's a fantastic piece of work. And for other clubs, I've used, they being members of Clubs New South Wales, they've used the Clubs New South Wales model statutory declaration. There's the nomination form for directorship, the application form. Now, I put in an application form that was similar to like you're going for a professional job. So the nominees sort of knew they did know what we were specifically looking for. The board curriculum vitae template. I think we should start doing board curriculum vitaes more and more so we can capture some of the great things that we do on our boards. An interview questionnaire, which was pretty long, and the whole point being the nominations committee wouldn't ask every single one of those questions, and a scoring matrix. So it's great to ask interview questions, but you need to score as you go so you can go back and think about people's answers and so forth. So this is the level of detail that Orange wanted. For other boards where I've done a nominations package for, it doesn't go to that much detail. So there's some aspects of this that aren't in the Constitution at the present time, but are worked into the Constitution over the next few years. So it'll be a pretty rock solid process. The last section was the induction and orientation, and it was a couple of pages on how to induct a director. We often get a new director and we just plonk them there and give them a couple of board packs and hope for the best. So this was a fairly good step-by-step program on how to induct your new director so they can hit the ground running. The best place to start a nominations process is around the time of the board review. Now, I know a lot of boards don't do board evaluations, which is a real shame because they're a great opportunity to really look in the mirror and make sure that your personal and professional goals are aligned with the club and the club is benefiting from your particular skill set and your perspective. So the nominations process starts at around that board review, and I've got there the director search is when you start to use that book, Applying for a Directorship. That's when you start putting it out. But definitely the director search goes on all the time. Once you know who you're looking for and why you're looking for them with a robust strategy, then you can start to open your eyes about different people that may fit really well on your board. So let's go have a look at your worksheet, the governance check and action. Do I have a position description for my board? Have I checked the constitutional requirements? Do I need to recommend changes? So a lot of the work around the club's constitution is service members or with other clubs like golf clubs or bowling club members can only hold the presidential spot. That needs a review. It doesn't need to change straight away. I'm not saying go and change all your constitutions, but you really need to have a think about, well, who have we got in our pool, and could we benefit from someone else looking after the club who may not be a service member or a bowl member or a golf member chairing the club. Am I on the right size board? 9 is still a bit big. 5 or 7 is ideal. 5 or 7, when you reduce your board numbers, you're not necessarily reducing member representation. Remember, that's not why you're there. It actually reduces the cost of governance, and a lot of boards don't talk about the cost of governance, but every time you go to a conference or you have a meeting, your AGMs, your election processes, all those kind of things, that adds to the cost of governance. So less people, less cost of governance. Have I participated in a board evaluation, and have I made changes to the way I govern as a result of a board evaluation? Do I know how my skills match the strategic future of the club? Do I have a skills matrix? So what have you got that the club needs? And if you haven't got it, do you do something about it? Do I have a book of the club's board policy and have I read it? So like I said, I've got 40 board policies which I give to my clients when they book strategic planning. Do I know what kind of strategic leadership is needed on my board? And could I tell you my club's strategic vision and values and the key objectives I have approved for the future? So that's a nice little governance check in action. I mean, there's a billion questions you can ask there. But some of these questions are the common gaps that I see on boards. They're not, their actions, their behaviours aren't quite matching up to what the company needs. So the good news is, up to this point, most of the work has been done for you. There's board policies, 40 board policies are being written, mandatory director training, that's been written, the nominations books, the ones that I supply my other clubs, they've been written, the advertising, all that stuff has been done. But there is something that hasn't been done, and this is probably the hardest part of board succession planning, and it's the big me questions. So the number one barrier to succession planning may be you. So think about it. What would I lose today if I gave up my position? I asked that question, and we had directors in the room who were enjoying some absolutely sensational food and beverages and ambience of the Park Hyatt at Melbourne. So if you were to give up your position, those kind of things disappear. The parking spot, the blazer, and the companionship of being on that board. Another really difficult question to ask is, how many questions do I ask about the future leadership of the club? Talking about even thinking about, what does the board need, and does it still need me? Does it need someone different? What's my approach to change? Another really difficult question. There is so much change. I don't have to talk about it much because you all can see it. From education, technology, the contingent workforce. The contingent workforce is the highly casualised and freelance workforce that's prevalent today. Diversity. Okay, so Sydney is one of the most multicultural cities in the world. There's about 48% multiculturalism in Sydney. Governance standards, leadership, and perspective. Perspective's a big topic. How vast is my perspective and vision? So how the more experience, the more personal wisdom and that you have, and the more aware you are of your demographics and how you fit in with the rest of the of society, means that your perspective will become larger. And do I look the same as my fellow directors? What are we missing? If you've got a board of generally 70-something year-old men, white, with a services background, so you're all, if you go back to that slide on experiential, that means you've all experienced military, so you all expect a certain kind of culture. If you've got a group of 9 men on your board, or even 8 men and 1 woman on a board with those same experiences, it's really going to lock you in to doing things a certain way. It's very difficult to break out of it if there's 9 of you all saying this is the way we need to go. You do need to mix it up. You need to mix up all those perspectives, mix up all those views, which leads to this slide. Can I really trust these people to govern my club? If you have a look at the people in that slide, we've got people from different countries, different religions, probably different orientations. There's probably people in same-sex relationships, people with children from 2 different families, all kinds of different things happening in that picture. And from our perspective, experiential and personal and demographic, it can throw up some challenges about opening the doors to people that don't look like us, that don't think like us, that have a different perspective. And getting to trust those people is a really, really big challenge. Have I been honest with myself about my ongoing capability to add value? I've got to leave something behind. I've got to leave the blazer in better condition than when I found it. What will be my legacy? And the All Blacks do a bit of this. When you join the All Blacks rugby union team, part of the induction is you're not going to be here forever. What you should do is make sure you leave the jersey in better condition than what you found it. And that's leaving your legacy. It's a great way to think about coming off the board. When I hand over that blazer, what condition am I going to hand it over in? Somewhere in your answers is your real challenge to succession planning. Remembering back to that slide, 43% want to keep things the same. That's status quo thinking. And only 14% have actually got a plan in place. So 1 in 2 directors want to leave everything the same. Well, 1 in 2 directors want change, but then only 1 in 5, or less than 1 in 5, actually make that change happen. Here are some very common fears. There is always there's someone on the board saying you are trying to get rid of me. So the solution there is building a culture of trust and strategy. That's not going to happen overnight. So you've got to build that culture of trust and strategy. Strategy is really important, and we need to have that trust in one another, that we can have an inquiring culture on our board as well. When you build that robust strategy, it's not just a point of facilities and operations. You must have objectives around leadership and governance and how you behave as a board member. To outperform is to outbehave. The best performing companies have the best behaviour, and that starts at that board level. All the time, I'm not convinced we need women on our board. The solution here is to learn about the power of perspective. You haven't got women on the board because women should be on the board. You want women on the board, and you want people of different ages on the board, and you want people of different skill sets and different life experiences, because you want that power of perspective. The more perspectives you have on the board, the less risk. There's lots and lots of research about companies that outperform other companies because they have the perspective on the board. And it's not just having different people on the board. You've got to also manage that culture. I'm a volunteer and I should be safe from criticism. demystify board evaluations, I now start with just the board pack. So we have a look at the board pack. There's a lot of things I can tell from the board pack and the annual reports and so forth, how decisions are made. Okay, and this is a really big one. What would I do? Do we give a dinner with friends and family? What other retirement rituals do we have? Do we give a plaque? Do we give a watch? What do we do? And then what's the rewards for serving as a director, for example, life membership? And what next? One of the big things I think about when I see the boards is the companionship that's on the board. It's a really powerful group identity. Coming out of that group identity, you need to manage that. You need to personally manage that and think, well, what next? What did we learn today? So your basics need to be in order. That's your policy, your strategy, your education. And I can help you with that. You need to facilitate the conversation and process from first principles. As part of the conversation, there needs to be a period of self-reflection and a reality check from current board members. You may need a constitutional review. You are competing for a rare resource. So people who actually want to be on a board and give up that time for 3 or 4 more years, that's a rare resource. A lot of people my age are looking for a directorship to build our CV. The guidebook and indeed your governance must be of an exceptionally high standard. So your material needs to be of an exceptionally high standard to match the skill set of the people that you want to get on the board. So thanks for spending some time with me on board succession. It's a very interesting and complex topic. Now, for new clients who want to book a strategic planning session with me, remember strategic planning is central. You've got to have that robust plan. I'm going to give you my 40 board policies. So if you book strategic planning in the next 3 months or so, we'll get you that 40 board policies book. And I'll also give you a discount on the nominations book. I've supplied for other clubs where we've run the election and the nominations process and returning officer. There's still a bit of tinkering about to make it tailored to your club. So that's for new clients booking strategic planning over the next few months. So give me a call, Shane Leslie, Integrated Governance, 0412 241 773. That's 0412 241 773. Shane at integratedgovernance.com.au. Shane is spelled Shayne, but doesn't matter, it'll get to me anyway. www.integratedgovernance.com.au. You can also have a chat to Cameron. He loves talking about his work. Thanks so much for joining me today, and talk to you soon.